Hello and welcome to the Life Together podcast, where we share in meaningful conversation about living for Christ and loving one another. Thanks for joining today, and we hope you enjoy this episode. Well, hey everyone, I'm here today with Ben Keehn, and for some of you, Ben needs no introduction at all. Y'all love and miss Ben and Haley, but we're so glad that they're here in town with us for a little bit, along with baby Joanna. Ben has introduced himself as the security guard for Joanna. That's probably accurate.
I'm her bouncer. She's a celebrity.
Yeah, there we go. But for others who are a part of Lost River, maybe you've come in the past year or two, and so you haven't gotten to meet Ben. So Ben, how about you just kind of give a brief introduction of who you are and how you're connected to the church family here at Lost River.
Well, sure. I was added on by marriage. I met Haley back in 2018. She was Haley Earnhardt then, and we got married. I was working at a church in California in the San Francisco Bay Area, San Jose, Miller Avenue Church of Christ. And yeah, we got married a year later after we met, and we moved here. I moved here in February of 2019, and the church was gracious and kind to offer me to work alongside Lawrence and Darrell and to get involved in the work here, to be really focused on the young people, the college and high school and junior high especially. And so for, about 2.5 years from, 2019 through 2021, I worked here, and yeah, it was a really special time. Haley and I were newlyweds, so it was special just to be here and to be married, but it was also really a joy to get to know so many of those young souls and to be influenced by them and impacted by their faithfulness and their joy and their goodness, and just being so impressed. All the parents here are putting such hard work and doing an amazing job of raising their kids in the faith, and they have such a leg up, and it was just a joy and a grace to get to work here and to be involved in those kids' lives. So
yeah. Well, I definitely feel the same, and I think so much of what you started has just continued to grow more and more and more. And we just wrapped up Camp Forge, and that's kind of like the culmination sometimes of just all the work that's gone in that started, when you first moved here, and that so many parents and everyone at Lost River has poured into. And it was a really special weekend. And honestly, like anytime I'm working with the young people, like you often come to mind, things you would do, things you would say. And so I appreciate that. But beyond just like the passing of the torch and my hopeful being able to pass the baton well or receive the baton well, I remember just so many fun and good memories from the time that we overlapped here at Lost River.
Yeah.
And
that was a sweet time.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. So I really just appreciate you and Haley both, and it's awesome to receive y'all back here for, a week's time, but now as parents, and that's really awesome.
It's crazy.
So what, I know everybody wants to hear about that. So baby Joanna's now here. What has that been like for you and Haley?
That's a good question. I want to answer that question, but I also want to give a shout out to all the families that hosted those weekly devotionals on Thursday nights. Melanie and Dave Coffey, Natalie and Randy Scarborough, Lauren and Jared Nix. I think the Normans hosted them for a while too. It was just a lot of the work I did could not have been done without families like that who, that's an unbelievable commitment to make every single weeknight for kind of an undefined amount of time.
Yeah.
And they all did it with smiles and with grace. Anyway, that was just I couldn't have done anything without families like that supporting and really leading the way in the work I was trying to do. But yeah, being a parent, like with those examples in mind, it's been really powerful. Haley's models for motherhood and, are so many of the women at this church. And it's just, I'm so grateful for their, that kind of lineage, in like maternal lineage in a sense. Like she has so many people that she thinks of often that are great examples to her that she leans on, that will just text her for pictures and see how she's doing. And so being parents, it's really, one of the first things that I noticed about Haley was how great she was with kids, and I thought, here's a woman that I know will be just naturally a great mom. And it's been cool to see God give us an opportunity to do that and to see her just kind of naturally fall into that role. So right now it's just kind of problem solving. I mean, she's 3 months old, so she cries, and there's like only a few options of what it can mean. We're not really having to figure out how to discipline or like all the complexities that come with schooling or all that. So it's really just a joyful time right now. A little sleepless, but it's not even that bad with her. She's a great sleeper. So really grateful to God, and it's just been fun, like really, really fun time.
Yeah. And where does the name Joanna come from?
Yeah, Haley and I, we've been making lists of baby names since we were dating. I'm pretty sure we were just real forward about that because it was a desire we both had. And so there's no family connection or anything like that. We just, I like to look in the Bible for names, and Joanna's one of those names that gets overlooked, but it's in there. She was one of the, like Lawrence pointed out in his sermon on Sunday, she was one of the first and early supporters of Jesus' ministry out of her own finances. And she was there Resurrection Sunday. And her name means God is gracious. And I just really liked the meaning of that name. And, Haley and I had a couple miscarriages before Joanna came along. And so it was just really significant to us. We didn't struggle with that for an especially long period of time. I know many have, and our hearts go out to those people and the suffering that goes along with that, the pain. But it just felt like such a gift. And we wanted in her name to always remember that God's been gracious to us and given us this little gift. And she has been just through and through. She's so content and joyful, and she's starting to like smile and respond to us like babies do. And it's a good reminder. And I really, it just seems to really suit everything for the family. So
Yeah. Wow. That's really beautiful. Well, so you and Haley were here for about 2.5 years, something like that.
Yeah.
Then moved to Seattle, and shortly thereafter began working with the Kirkland Church of Christ. Tell us about what that has been like and just what is going on with the work there. I know there's maybe even some particular stories that you want to highlight of people who God is making a difference through there.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about like the work in the area in general, Pacific Northwest, greater Seattle area, kind of the difficulties the church at large is facing there. There's many churches there, actually. And then talk about some of the work that Kirkland's doing by God's grace, attempting to do. And then I would love to talk about some of the people there, the church themselves at Kirkland. And yeah, so
Awesome.
One of the things about Seattle, one of the first things is just how expensive it is to live there. And this has lots of impacts. It impacts people who want to raise families. It's just a lot more sensible to raise families in a place where you can afford to buy a home and where you can afford to save and look to the future in those ways. And it's a lot more sensible in some senses. And so one of the things that leads to is high turnover in the congregation, or it's hard to retire there. And so it can be difficult to, we have 3 elders and they're great men, and I want to talk about them a little later, but it can be difficult to find families who are just staying around, to have that kind of older leadership that comes with time and age. And so that's one of the struggles I think all the churches have, just having consistent leadership from older Christians, families who are staying there, sometimes at basically at great cost to themselves. It'd be a lot more, their money would go a lot further in other parts of the country. And so that can be a difficulty. And even young families, like, they come and they go kind of quickly sometimes. And that's one of the challenges. A lot of the members have a lot of people they tell me about that they miss, because especially through the pandemic, how easy it was for lots of people to move. They, people just went. And that's a struggle. And then you could look at the school system, what's going on, what's being taught to the kids. I know a lot of the families talk to me about that often. And we have a couple of members who are teachers, and they have a kind of frontline in the trenches understanding of it, and they're doing the Lord's work there, and they see it that way. They have their calling, but it's tough. Some of those same teachers are putting their kids through private school because they understand how difficult and how worldly and dark the school system and the teaching there is. So that's, that weighs, another thing that weighs on families being there. And then there's just the idea that laborers are few, kind of based off both of those things. When we start talking to guys who want to, or families really that are thinking about preaching and want to preach somewhere, we've talked to a lot of guys in the past couple of years, and the school system and the cost of living just kind of, it's tough. And I'm not, I understand. Those are the first responsibility that we have is to be a husband, and second to be a good father, and for moms and wives and mothers the same. And if you're going to move somewhere, it's going to put a lot of stress or tension on the family relationship. It's like it's a big commitment, and so it can be difficult to find laborers. That being said, there's a Caleb Spear and his wife Kendall are going to move up there in June, and we're really excited. I'm super excited to work with him and work with both of them and get to know them. And we have another guy who's a recruiter, I think, for Boeing, and he's helping with the work there. He's a spark plug, man. He's just like has high energy, and his culture of joy is really infectious and good for the congregation. His name's James, and him and his wife Amanda have been helping out for a bit now, kind of working hard for Kirkland. And so he's doing a lot of visitor follow-up stuff, and it's just really helpful. So even in that sense, where there's just one of the challenges in the churches up there is finding people to work hard. God's been gracious to Kirkland and sent a lot of hard workers our way, honestly. And then the last thing, you might just look at the culture. I remember when we were moving and people were like, why do you want to move to Seattle? Like all this, darkness and worldliness. And there's a truth to it. I'm not gonna lie to anybody. There is some of that lawlessness, a lot of addiction and homelessness. It's not the definition of the whole place. It's kind of like, I think, any urban area in the country. Maybe it's worse. I don't know. I'm not a sociologist by any means, but that is a challenge. We have a lot of, but the upside or the upshot, maybe not the upside. It's not an upside, but one of the interesting kind of consequences of that is that we find a lot of people coming our way who come our way by 12-step and by trying, by kind of meeting the Lord and getting over their addictions. And so we have a few people, a good number of people actually, who will openly talk about how many days sober they are in Bible class, or, and so as challenging as that is, I think much like the mission is, like, that's why we're there. If we weren't there, where would those people go? What church would they find, and how would they find a group? And then, by God's grace, I'm sure he would provide for them. But those challenges are real. And we have members who are involved in lots of stuff like that and helping and being engaged on that level. So those are a lot of the challenges, I think. And it can impact and it can feel like, I don't know, it can feel like a dark place sometimes. Yeah. I mean, literally, with the cloud cover 8 months out of the year. But I think also some of that. So that's like, just in a nutshell, some of the challenges the church faces up there and some of the things we're trying to work through.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I know a lot of churches experienced, some major shakeups through COVID, and you kind of hinted at that. Do you know what kind of the congregation size was like before and after COVID, and where y'all are at now?
Yeah, I think the church number was at about 220, 230 before COVID. And now it's probably about, on a Sunday morning, we're probably averaging having 160 or somewhere in there. 160 is probably a fair number to say. And after COVID, I mean, it was also, people were slow to come back for whatever reason, good reasons, and all that. But people were slow to come back, and so for a while it was lower than that when I got there, 140, 150. Yeah, so that's been a lot of change.
Yeah,
a lot of young families, moved to Texas and Tennessee,
right,
and all sorts of other places.
Yeah, so I'm interested also in asking about. You talked about how there's a different culture in which the people that you're reaching out to. You said some people are bringing up 12 steps in class, and I'm X many days sober, and the way you phrased it was, if not us, if we're not that safe harbor, that city set on a hill, or whatever analogy in the Bible you want to label it, where else do those people go?
Yeah.
And I'm curious, I noticed this when I went out to Miller Avenue in San Jose area. There's all the people that I talked to in the community, whether it was at coffee shops or even just grocery stores, like, first of all, everyone was really talkative. Everyone just like, it was I don't know, it was cool just walking around talking to people. And then how open-minded people were,
Yeah.
and how genuinely curious they were. It was as if it was almost this total clean slate. There was no, like, Christianity didn't come with all this baggage of people. I know a hot button phrase now is like religious trauma.
Yeah.
People didn't seem to be coming into my interaction and our conversation with all this baggage from, negative church culture.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, what has that been like in Seattle?
Oh yeah. I mean, I like working in that kind of place because I honestly struggle with the conversations about like different types of churches, different denominations. And I just struggle with that. That's hard work, and it's hard work to be gracious and to be humble and loving through those conversations, because obviously we have differences. We all believe in Christ, we all claim his name, and yet we've come to different conclusions. And so threading the needle of being straightforward and striving to get back to the design we see in the scripture inspired by the Holy Spirit and in Christ's life, while also being gracious and understanding, is something I've not always handled well. And it's hard work. And it feels sometimes like it gets nowhere in my experience, because I'm not very good at it. But being in Seattle rather, it is like, people, we have multiple people who are like, yeah, I was an atheist. And then in the process, I'll talk about Alex later. And I know he'd be okay with me talking about, he's very open. He shares openly. And he's like, yeah, I was an atheist. And then in 12-step, they say you have to pray to a higher power, and some people will pray to the door because it's what brought you in, kind of like all these things, being very open. He's like, but that wasn't working. So when I prayed to God, that's when I got sober the first time. And he was living in this sober living arrangement that was right across from the church building. He's like, I got to worship this God that helped me get sober.
Wow.
And so he just came from an atheistic, he's like a major in chemistry or something like that. It's very scientifically minded. He's really smart, and yet so there's a lot of challenges in that kind of worldview. There can be a lot of challenges in that highly educated, worldly, atheistic viewpoint. But he was overwhelmed by God's grace in his life. And so there's no church background. There's no, we don't have to study, why we're not this church or that church or the differences, because he just wants to be there. Mm-hmm. He just wants to be at church and be with the church. And so there's a real directness to it that is refreshing. But that being said, there's also a lot of challenges. There's a lot of things to learn and a lot of things to unlearn, and a lot in the process of just a lifetime of not knowing Jesus Christ also leads to a lot of challenges. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about him specifically. I'm talking about lots of people who come to Christ in later in life, having lived a life away from God and kind of just followed the culture out there. And that's why I think churches out there, that's the one I'm talking about, with like being that, like you said, city set on a hill, or just being this place where people can come, because there is just a culture that I grew up in the public schools there, and it's really everyone does what's right in their own eyes, and sometimes people do well with that, but a lot of times people don't. And so there's a lot to unlearn too, and people need the grace of God that instructs them, like Titus 2:11 says.
Yeah. So that's the culture and some of the challenges. So when you arrived, what was that experience like, and mm-hmm. what were some of the maybe encouraging moments along the way through these people and the sharing of their life stories with you that have impacted you?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people there who are, the whole church is really just passionate about working, and they're even, as much of a mission field as Seattle feels like, they're really involved with the work in the Philippines and the work in Kenya. We had a couple of deacons go to Kenya this last year, I think in October. One of our deacons and a couple of members went to the Philippines last May, and that was really neat. We support a couple of preachers there who are really special guys, just awesome. I mean, those guys work hard. So there's a lot of that. They have a history of going to Costa Rica and doing a lot of evangelistic work there. Funny enough, we have a radio program, which I know, like, you're like, what? It's like, it's kind of antiquated, but believe it or not, on the AM station and the AM Christian radio station in Seattle, we have one of the number one listened to radio programs. And so a lot of Christian people in the area, a lot of Christian people in the Seattle area who aren't attached to churches listen to that. And we get a lot of seekers and visitors because of that radio program. It's really neat. So a lot of they play our sermons. One of our members, I'll talk about him too. He edits them and he makes them the right length and everything to go on the radio. And people come in who know me, who know maybe it's been Brent's sermons for a long time, and a lot of people came in to hear Brent, and he did a lot of good work in that process. And so that's one of the works that is kind of almost at this point passive, and there's a lot of fruit there. The church is doing a lot to do kind of like care. We call them care groups, kind of like we divide the congregation up, kind of like the elder groups at Lost River, I think, into 3 or 4 groups, and meet in people's homes once a month. And there's evangelistic effort there. Mostly it's discipleship and kind of growing together. Haley and I have run a coffee shop out of our house a couple times where we invited, kind of like open house, invited the whole church to come through, and that was wild.
Well, that's cool. Wait, so tell me about that. How did that work? Was it just like open invite, come between these hours in the day?
Yeah. Yeah, and it was really fun. I have an espresso machine, and I was just trying to validate, my hobby that I've spent money on, that I'm embarrassed how expensive it is. And so I was like,
offering it back to the Lord in some way.
Exactly. If I do this, then I can get a more expensive espresso machine down the line.
Maybe some employees.
Exactly. Just start a whole thing. But I think Haley saw someone else do it on social media or something with their friend group, and we're like, we should do that with the whole church. And so we did, and it was like, we did it a couple times. We're going to do it again, I think, hopefully soon here. It's hard in our house to do it in the winter months, so we wait till kind of some summery, sunny-ish days where people can be inside or outside. But yeah, people would just come in and they would order, and I just made coffee the whole time, and it was really special. It was cool, people just came and it was different. But I think a lot of people talked, like some people met each other who never met each other, just because they came to the house, and a lot of people brought. One of our members, Clinton, is famous for his scones, and this member, Nerdy, she brought this orange cake or lemon cake that was unbelievable. Anyway,
man,
beside the point.
Well, I love that. That's such an awesome idea, and that's also one thing I love about you and Haley. I feel like y'all are so creative with hospitality, and I remember, I have to bring this up. I remember this so well. It was like the first time I came to y'all's apartment, and I was like admiring several different things, and it wasn't just like complimenting, like y'all have these nice dish towels or something. I don't know, making up something.
We do have nice dish towels.
Yeah, but it was cool because the response that you gave was, we just want our home to feel like people are stepping back into the Garden of Eden.
That sounds very eloquent. I do not remember saying that.
Well, it was beautiful. You probably just copied that from someone else, but no, I'm just kidding.
I think you're projecting your eloquence onto me. I probably said something like, "We just like having people over,"
And I interpreted it.
Yes,
as,
and you were very kindly interpreted it.
That's hilarious. No, I remember that very vividly, and I was like, man, what a great goal to have. That and regardless of the way that y'all have arranged things, the way that y'all, set your apartment up here or whatever your home is like in Seattle, it's that you and Haley do create that environment for people. You do open up a space in which people feel a kind of belonging that echoes Eden in some way. And so anyway, that's just cool to hear that y'all are still doing that and taking it up to the next level with this Coffee for Christ thing. I probably shouldn't say that, but
see, you're already making it more eloquent. That's like a nice alliteration. I just proved my point. It's just really it's something that brings us joy. Honestly, is to use this, and it validates some coffee bean purchases. But Seattleites love their coffee, so we just we stepped into that space easily.
Nice.
And then one of the things that Kirkland does that is pretty effective. And this is another thing Brent was big on, and I think there's so much wisdom in it, is instead of having gospel meetings, we do have gospel meetings with guest speakers, but putting a lot of effort and resources into having invitation events where the guy who's going to be here every week speaks. And so Brent would do it, and I've done it a couple times, where we're, like when Roe v. Wade got overturned, Brent had an invitation event about abortion, which was like bold, but also like it was a really powerful sermon, and he used some, he used stories from the members there and who were okay, who approved it, but it was really powerful, and we invited a lot of the area.
Are those online? Like, could you? Okay, that's interesting. That would be really helpful, I think, for people. I know I'll probably go back and listen to those, but really so good. Just on Kirkland Church of Christ.
Yeah. We have multiple websites right now. KirklandChurch.com will take you to our website. You also find those on YouTube. If you go to our YouTube page, Kirkland Church of Christ, and go to the live tab, you'll find all of our old kind of services. So,
okay, cool. That's a great idea.
Yeah, Kirkland Church of Christ YouTube page. Click the live button or you won't find them. But yeah, and so I like the idea of that, and the wisdom of it is that, people come in here, hopefully if it's something that they relate to or that resonates with them. If it's a guest speaker, they're like, well, great, I'll never see this guy again. But having it be the local members and the speaker who's going to be here, it gives more, I think, reason to come back and to be a regular and to kind of come back again. And so we get a lot of, one of the things Kirkland is really, really is, and I think this is a Brent influence as well. I'm just so appreciative for the work him and Gail did there. Is we pray for seekers all the time, and I've never been at a church that has more random people come in just off the street. Like it's wild. It's super neat. And so we have invitation events, and we also have these big singings twice a year that we invite a lot of people to. One was while we were gone, unfortunately, this last Saturday night. But we get like local choir teachers come because they're like, "This is amazing." We love the a cappella, so it's really some of the more. It's funny leaning into the more, we might say, antiquated. I did air quotes just now for like things like we have Sunday evening services. We do radio program and our a cappella singing are like things that like draw people in because they're different, and we're not doing them to draw people in, but it's funny the impact that it has kind of doing things in these simpler, older paths. Like we get so many people who come on Sunday nights. I shouldn't say so many, but we get a few every month who are like, I just wanted to go to church and I could only make it in the evening, and you're the only church that has 5 p.m. service. I think that's funny, like the two like most old-fashioned, I say this lovingly, like old-fashioned things about us, our radio program and our Sunday evening services, we get visitors from that. Yeah. And so it's like, praise God, we're really grateful for those opportunities. But that's some of the work that's being done through simple things like that, We have a youth weekend every year. We do VBS. We have so many people who work. I should show you some pictures. Last year they built Jesus' tomb on stage. It was unbelievable. And then I already said this, but our visitor flow is pretty neat. I've never been in a church like it. Every Sunday you'll hear, a lot of Sundays I should say, you'll hear someone pray for seekers, that God would send seekers our way, and it's cool. That's a lot of the work that's going on there, and that's kind of the stuff that I'm not even directly involved in. Some of those things, a lot of those things, it's just kind of the culture of that church that the elders and Brent did a lot of work to cultivate in that at Kirkland.
Yeah, that's awesome. I hear in that in emphasis on the simplicity through which the Spirit works.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel that here too. Like, we don't have the Sunday night services anymore. We have, the 3-hour-ish service in the morning. But on Sunday nights, I've noticed how many people are able to feel more welcomed into a home than into, a large building that is kind of intimidating, and this large crowd of people. I think especially like a couple that comes to mind is Stu and Hannah Westfall. Like so many people have come through their backyard and sat around the fire and have been even led to Christ through that relationship. And it's just interesting to me to think about, sometimes we can get so amped up on having specific programs or just investing so much in these big ideas, and yet in your experience, and then I think it's true here at Lost River, it's often through very simple ways that the Spirit works. And maybe there's something to that. God's power perfected in weakness.
Sure.
It's like these simple, unassuming ways are all the ways that the Spirit ends up moving people to come to Christ. So,
Well, think about the first people who received Jesus and his disciples. They went around Israel and they only stayed with people who were what? Hospitable.
mm-hmm.
I don't think there's an accident in the way God designed, or Jesus himself designed, they're the same person, but like God and Jesus designed that work to be. Go to the lost sheep of Israel, but these people at least were following the law. They were following God's law, and he put a high premium in the Old Testament on hospitality. And those are the first people that received the blessings. Jesus said, bless them, bless the house you walk into, and bless them. And if they don't, then curse them. That's very Deuteronomy, very Old Testament, but that's the will of God. And they received it. And I think sometimes we miss that God's simplest, I don't want to speak too much for God's mind, but I think one of the things that God gives those who follow him is a simple method for expressing or sharing your faith is just your home, welcoming people into your life, your very life. You can put on airs when you're out in public, when you're at the church building, but once you're in your home, people see how you talk to your wife and how you talk to your kids, and the good, bad, and the ugly, and the indifferent, all of it. And hopefully those who have been transformed by Christ and are full of his Spirit, when people enter our homes, even if we don't have Bible verses on the walls, which I think is a good thing to do, but even if we don't, it's felt. And I think that's one of the simplest ways that we overlook in being sharers of our faith. And people don't, in my experience, care if the house is a little messy or within reason, I suppose, but like or if we had people over a couple weeks ago and Joanna was crying the whole time, but the other two couples we invited over had a great time. But Haley and I were just at our wits' end and unable to host, really. But still, people they told us they were really glad to come over. It's like, sometimes it's just like even if you feel like you can't do it, I feel like it's good to push and to try and sacrifice a little more, because I think God has always and does really leverage hospitality into greater things for him and his glory, in his name.
Amen. Yeah. So thinking about a couple different people, you've mentioned a few names, Alex, and then maybe one other person. I didn't catch their name, but it sounds like during your time there, you've been very impacted by particular individuals and their stories and the ways that maybe they've been led to Christ. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was discussing this with Haley this morning, which that's actually where I want to start. And I would be remiss not to, she said, if you can't think of anything to say, just talk about how awesome your wife is. And I was like, yeah, probably not going to happen. That's what I told her. But it's because I knew I was already planning on talking about her. This week, it's been really nice to be here, especially just to see for Haley all these people that she loves, but overwhelmingly how many people love her so totally. And I've always have been that way for her mom and for her, and it's overwhelming. I mean, I think the other day, Monday or Tuesday, I can't remember which. I think it was Monday. She went and got coffee with Claire, and I just, because it was just convenient, I went with them and I sat far off, and I was just like creepily observing them having coffee, and it was like, these are things that Haley gave up, largely for my desires to work out there. Not that I'm not saying she's not on board. She is. She 100%, 110% supports the work and so wants to be out there. She loves it out there too. I don't want to paint a picture wrongly, but what I do want to point out and praise her and thank God for is that she sacrificed a lot to move out there. I mean, the people she left and the relationships she has here are just, irreplaceable, truly irreplaceable. And I couldn't do it without her making those sacrifices and being there for me and never making me feel guilty about that. She never says, I wish I was back in Egypt, I wish I was back. She never says that. But I know when we're here, I can see it so clearly in every single interaction, just how much she's given up to work there. And it's life-changing, really. It's humbling. And so I want to start there. But let's move on from all that stuff.
Before you get teary-eyed.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I see a little bit.
I think you're wrong. No, yeah, but seriously, the work she's doing and what she's done is really...
That's awesome.
It's huge. But yeah, there's a lot of people. I have a list here of people I want to make sure to mention. Some by name, some anonymous. But one of the people I mentioned was she's a teacher, Crystal. We have a couple of teachers who work in the public school system. Clinton, I talked about his magnificent scones, but also Crystal. She's worked in like a bilingual system, and she's fluent in Spanish, best I know. She's also done a lot to like provide. She got a lot of the Christians organized to provide meals for some kind of homeless, you know, some homeless individuals in the community through like a system and stuff. It was really, really sweet. But yeah, like she works so hard in the public schools, and she talks about it as her calling, you know. And she's a reading specialist, I think, at this point. So she's helping young kids who have trouble reading to learn how to read. You know, just like the simplest, I don't mean simple as in easy. I know it's hard work, but like one of the most necessary things to be literate, literally, like directly.
Yeah.
And that's what she does every day. And she, you know, and surrounded by a very, you know, kind of godless system in the public schools in Seattle area. And it's taxing on her, you know. I don't want to get too much into telling her story, but but it's just it's so beautiful, the grace of God she is in that place. And I know the light that she shines there. And Clinton as well. And, you know, for Clinton, there's not a lot of male teachers, you know. And so in his sense, like the same thing, like his calling to do that. And he's amazing. Like they both are just such lights, honestly. There's a guy, Jim Bruins, who, he got a cancer diagnosis 20 years ago, I think, like 6 months to live. And he's big on prayer and fasting, and he talks about it, and he's around, you know,
Yeah.
by God's grace. And his wife Mo, and both Jim and Mo, Maureen is her name, both Jim and Mo, if you ask, I think anybody at Kirkland, they are the most joyful, the most grateful. You know, Jim still has a lot of, I don't know if health struggles, he's still immune compromised, and there's still a lot of difficulties that come. He gets, and he pushes through, and he's always joyful, and he always praises God, and he always shares his favorite verse from Ephesians: "To him who can do exceedingly far abundantly more than we can think or ask." You know, he loves that verse, and he's lived it, and he's seen it, and he shares it. And they're in the latter half, they're in the back nine. You know, they're in the back, they're
Yeah.
and yet Mo. I'm not gonna say how old she is. You know, I don't want to be rude, but she works the activities at VBS. She does the sports at VBS every year,
Wow.
and that's just them. They're vibrant, and their energy and their joy is in the spirit. You know, you can see they have every aspect of the fruit of the spirit. They have in
awesome.
spades, and that they would give credit, and I think you have to God's grace and the Holy Spirit in their lives, bearing that fruit. And then people like Jennifer Green, who's been a cashier I remember when I was in high school, we had open campus lunch in the Safeway, which is a grocery store that she works at. I would go there all the time, and I'd see her, and I knew we were at different churches at that point, but I knew her, and I knew she was a Christian lady, and she just talks about she always shares her faith with her coworkers, and she's also, you know, back nine, you know, like she's a little older, and she just like has this like constant joy, constant smile on her face, and she's just working hard in her job, but also working hard to be a light there. And it's amazing the people that she influences and touches. And she has, you know, she's taking care of her mom, taking care of her son at the same time. And her husband, Larry, is working on those things too. And they're all together. It's like just an amazing family with so many reasons to say, well, you know, like I got my family stuff to work on. Maybe I'll just, and it's like, no, like they're the most evangelistic, enthusiastic, you know, age, family responsibilities, none of those things deter them. And it's just amazing. So like, I think you're right that youthfulness comes with energy, but by God's grace, we have these older members.
That's amazing.
Who almost lead the way in their energy and their vivaciousness. You know, it's really, really tenacity, you know, those kind of just great qualities. We have another member who's, I think, come to faith later in her life, Michelle, and she, Haley was talking about, like, she goes all out when she teaches Bible class. You know, she just like, she gets the kids toys, and she from her own kind of resources, and she just like, she goes hard at it. And she also is like working really hard because, you know, she came out of the world, and she works really hard to be a light in her family. And sometimes I know that can be, you know, just like, that's a challenging thing. It's a real challenging thing. And she just day in and day out, just she wears it in a way that's like, this is, you know, she's working through it. And I mean that in a positive way. Like she just shares her faith and the joy she has in it and the challenges she has in it openly. You know, she's not ashamed in a sense to own the Lord like that and to own the challenges that being the Lord has put in her life, and she doesn't complain about it. But she, you know, it's just really infectious. It's like, wow, she's working so hard, you know, like, and she'll tell you all about it. We have guys like Julian and Nick and Mitchell and Adam. There's a lot of churches in the area that don't have preachers, and a lot of Sundays they're gone, which like, you know, we miss them. I'm like, man, why aren't they here more often? But it's like because they're preaching at these other churches in the area that don't have preachers. And so we miss them, but you can't really fault them, you know, because they're passionate about being helpful and working. We have a couple of members I know who support foreign evangelists out of their own funds. One of our members who's, you know, he, there's so much I could say. I'm going to keep it general and vague, but he supports his family, and he also supports 2 preachers in other countries out of his own salary. Like I think he supports them by himself.
Wow.
And he just, that's him. Like that's his desire. No one told him to do that. You know what I mean? But God is working through him working hard. We have some other ladies. We have this woman, Pat, who we have visitors. We do visitor cards. Or we have a QR code that will kind of put their information in if they'll fill it out on their phone. And she puts it all into a shared Google sheet. So like any member who wants to do visitor follow-up, whether it be a card or a text or a call, can just have this system say, when did they visit? How often they visited? Like she tabulates it all. And so we could just, anybody who wants to get involved in that work is so seamless because of the hard work she does. And then we have women like Valerie and Mariana who are just like every Sunday doing that, sending out cards and sending texts out and stuff. You got guys like Brett, who used to be like a campaign manager for political campaigns, and he's the one who really understood the radio program, and he's works hard at that, and he gets these radio ads that sound so professional. And his son Morgan is the one who edits the sermons down, and like, you know, they just do a lot of tireless behind the scenes work that is easy to not get credit for, but is like, you know, that what I said was passive. The radio program isn't passive for them. They do the legwork there. It's passive for me. And then, you know, last but certainly not least, to talk about our elders. We have a very proactive eldership who understand the challenges of the area we are in, who are constantly seeking to put more shepherds in, equip and train the young men, especially to be involved in leadership and shepherding. And then guys like one of the elders, Todd, every time I talk to him, he's like, he gives me this list of like 20 people he reached out to that week. And he's like, have you heard from this person? Like, I was texting this person. How do you think this person's doing? And it's just like every week he kind of shames me because he works a full-time job, and he spends, I think, all of his free time just reaching out to members of the congregation. And it is such like a teddy bear shepherding, beautiful heart thing. And, you know, a lot of the culture and the hard work and the togetherness comes from the top down in that sense. So those are the people I want to highlight. It's just amazing, by God's grace, you know, how the body works together. And a lot of people who are working real hard.
Yeah. Well, I love hearing that. And it's, I think you use the word like convicting or puts you to shame every week, this like elder that you talk to. I think hearing you share all of this, like, I'm like, oh man, I feel like all the more just desiring to grow deeper roots here and be more connected. And what's so cool about this to me is that this isn't just on your mind because of the podcast. You know, it wasn't like I asked, hey, you know, tell me all about the work in Kirkland, you know, put something together to share about what's going on there. It's like, this is just what's on your heart. And in fact, it was kind of just wide open, whatever you want to talk about. And the fact that you chose to talk about the work in Kirkland without focusing, you haven't said a single thing about your sermons or your specific ministry. It's like you care so much about all of these people who you clearly love so much and are so in awe of and inspired by through their flaws and all of that. It's just like it's so beautiful to see, and it inspires me. But yeah, I know in other times when you've just passed through, like the thing that you want to talk about is those people. When I ask how things are going, it's either about, you know, Haley or previously it was Joanna on the way or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. But following right after that, it's always about people that mean a lot to you in Seattle and who are making a difference. And that's just awesome to see. Like, that's the heart that we should all want to have, and not to hype you up too much. I know you're going to be like, no, let's downplay that in some way, but it really is, it's just a part of who you are. And I know that your heart and love for all those people is making a huge difference, I'm sure, and makes them feel like, wow, like all of what I'm doing is seen and valued. And I don't know, I just love hearing that.
Thank you. It's it really truly is a grace to get to work there and to do this work anywhere. It was a grace to do it here, and to be supported by the members. It's such a humbling thing. Just everything we have, like John the Baptist would say, no one can have anything unless you receive it from the Lord. It's just directly true in our line of work. When you give your whole life and are supported by Christians who are paying me out of the goodness of their hearts, because they value the work going on. And they, it's a humbling thing, and it's a connecting thing, but also it's hard. I don't know what I'm saying, honestly, but it's all about them, in that sense. Like, really, like, doing this work is just such a grace. Like, I couldn't do it. I literally would not be able to do what I'm doing if they weren't them, doing what they're doing. And we all, one hand washes the other, as one of my mentors always says, kind of. But, I could go on, honestly. There's other members. There's a family who just lost as their pregnancy was going along, they lost their child through pregnancy, and the joy they shared through it, it was unbelievable. Yeah. Not that it wasn't heartbreaking. And the church there is just so, connected through the difficulties and the challenges, but also through the, rejoicing with those who rejoice and weeping with those who weep. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I'm really grateful that that's been y'all's experience there. And I know when you went to Seattle, you weren't even sure exactly what you were going to do or where you might preach. And so to hear that this was where y'all ended up, and how just, it sounds like absolutely amazing it's been through challenges. I'm really, really glad to hear that. And it's one of those things, like, I don't know if you've felt this way, but sometimes when, like, my nose is to the grindstone here at Lost River, you're just all about, the work, and it's for the people. But when I go home, when I go somewhere else and I'm out of that for a moment, like, two things happen. One, I feel like this, it's like gravitational pull back. I hate being away. And then anytime that someone asks, how are things going there, it just, all of a sudden, I just get this huge download in my mind of I'm just flooded with, like, memories and, like, specific stories. And there's something about, like, being in the middle of the work, sometimes I just lose sight of that. I'm just, we get busy, we get caught up in just doing, the weekly tasks, and then stepping away allows me to regain perspective and just see how overwhelmingly blessed I am to be here and to be a part of this work. And so I don't know, maybe I'm asking a question through all of this. Like, what is that like? How do you feel the same, or do you feel like you're able to maintain that while you're there? And if so, like, how do you do that? Because I know maybe I'm over talking about this. Maybe I should just stop and let you talk. But I remember when you were here, like, you would talk about how the way that even you preach and teach is so relationally oriented. Like, your ideas, or like, if you're working on a passage, it's always kind of being funneled through conversations with other people. So anyway, maybe that's kind of the answer to my question. But anyway, what do you think about all that?
I think, I don't like traveling. It's funny enough, and not because I don't love to see people or want to be around. I have lots of friends in Tampa that we just saw, and lots of people here that I'm excited to be around. It was good to get lunch with you and Lawrence on Monday, and the Cochrans had us over, and the Kings had us over. I'm gonna get coffee with Jared Nix at some point. It's like there are people, and then there are people who I didn't list off right now that'd be really mad at me that I didn't get together with them this week. Because I don't like traveling, I just kind of lay low when I come to town to tell anybody. I just that's just kind of how. Because it's just like. I honestly, I was driving here and I was stressed about some of the things I have to get done when I get back, or I should be doing now maybe, I feel like. And but one of the greatest joys about coming here and, why I ultimately did agree to doing this podcast is because one of the greatest joys I have is getting to tell the members at Kirkland how inspirational they truly are. I think about, it's funny enough, just as coincidence would have it, Providence, if you want to say, I don't know, but I'm preaching on Nehemiah 3 this Sunday, which is one of these chapters in the Bible, like Romans 16, where it's like, why is this in here? Nehemiah's like, this person did this, and then them and their daughters worked on this. They worked on the dung gate. They did this. It's like, but there's a reason. There's a reason. Those are real people. These aren't mythological stories. And these people I told you about aren't mythological people. They are very real, very normal. We read in James where it says Elijah was a man just like us. We're like, was he really? But he was, and he prayed, and God stopped up the rain because of his prayers. And I share these stories with the church at Lost River in hopes that everyone will realize that even at a church of however many members Lost River has, as big as it is always, the work of the Lord is always accomplished through Christ's body and through every joint doing its part. And no one is off the hook from that. And the reason that I'm so passionate and excited and just humbled and joyful I get to work at Kirkland is because this is not the whole list. It's not. And it's unbelievable to do this kind of work. It's unbelievable to get to be the one who gets to talk about it or gets to talk in front of this group. It's like, what a absurd thing, because I'm not doing the lion's share of the work by any means. It's just a grace to get to be a part of it. And so one of the things that I missed one of my points that I started with this sentence because I'm rambling, but is when I get back and I get to share with them how encouraged they are that by the Christians in Bowling Green or in Tampa that hear about the work, and they realize that their examples, whether they understand it or not, is building up, edifying, exemplifying faith and work. The good works God has prepared for us beforehand to do. What they're doing here in Kirkland and Seattle is a boost to the churches all over this country. That is one of the joyful things I get to do when I travel and come back and see y'all. But I don't know if that's what you were asking, but that's what I was thinking as you were talking. It is hard. It's hard to be away. I feel like we had Joanna in February. I feel like I was just getting back into my routines, and that's not easy for me. I'm not, disciplines don't come easy to Ben. And so I was feeling just like into rhythm again, and I'm a lot looking forward to reestablishing those. That's really hard work for me, because I'm an ox. I'm a stubborn man. And so, I'm going to have to put work in just to me when I get back and getting those routines going. And so I can work hard for these people who deserve it, but anyway, I'm talking about myself, but that's, so I do miss being there. I do think about a lot of the work I want to get back involved with when I get back, but they will be encouraged, I think, by knowing that their faith is shining a light for people, all over this country. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thinking about kind of bringing this to a good landing spot, I would definitely wish we could just keep talking all day long. In fact, sometimes I feel like when you were here, we would probably talk for longer than we should on some days. Occupational hazard. Yeah. But bringing it in for a landing here, you spent 2.5 years here, and you were so connected with this group, and maybe even more so since Haley grew up here. Those roots run even deeper than what you could
put into 2.5 years. But I don't know, when you think about this group and this church, what are some of the things that you want to leave us with?
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone who's listened to this point has been so encouraged by everything you've shared about the work in Kirkland and maybe inspired. I know I definitely feel that way. And just by your love itself, like the way that you love the people there is the kind of love that that reflects Christ, and that I certainly feel inspired by, to love others in the same way. But when you think maybe even as specific as it comes to mind, what are some of the things that you would just leave us with?
One of the things that I think about a lot, I thought about when I was here, I was kind of, as much as I loved being here and I was touched and humbled to get to work here, part of me was itching to get back to somewhere like Seattle. I wasn't sure what it was going to be. It might have been California, but they feel similar in my mind. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Oregon. I think a lot of people who know me know that. I could have worked there, I guess, but, kind of West Coast ideas of just being in a place like that, I felt passionate about it. And so I was itching a little bit to get back there. And by God's grace and by Haley's grace, she was gracious enough to lead in that way. I left it up to her where we would move, and she chose Seattle, and that's been a gift. But one of the things, I think Bowling Green as a city or a town, or as a home base and a place to be, has so many benefits. Just the ability to be in each other's lives all the time, and to be involved and to be close and to be comfortable. Those are all, like we said, the hospitality stuff. There's so many opportunities that spring from that to share your faith and to be active and, just working hard for the Lord, for the glory of Christ's name and in His Spirit, all of that. But they also come with, I think, a lot of opportunities for possibly a faith that can be complacent. And I'm not saying this to point fingers at anybody specifically. It's not but I just know, like, for myself when I was here, and one of the temptations, I think, for Christians and who live in a place that's comfortable like this is to lose sight of the fact that Christianity isn't about resting on our laurels ever. Israel had a mission to be a light to the nations, and they got a little uppity and they got a little complacent and comfortable, thinking, well, God's just blessed us to be in this great place, this, the land flowing with milk and honey, and we're just happy to be here. And that they failed miserably at their mission that God had for them. They were supposed to be priests to the world, a light to the nations, a kingdom of priests. That's not how we remember them. And sometimes, my encouragement, maybe this is a sharp encouragement, I don't mean it to be too sharp, but if it is, don't let a life here in Bowling Green be too separated from the mission of God's people. Always, we are spiritual Israel now. We have the same mission, not just to be a part of a church that we think is great, where we feel comfortable, that has great leadership, which this church does, has great unity, which this church enjoys. All these gifts that come from the Spirit and from Christ Himself in this church has a lot of those graces, and we do get to enjoy them, but there remains a rest for us, and it's not here. It's not now. It's not in Bowling Green. If this church keeps growing by God's grace like it is, that's such a great thing, but it's not just something to be enjoyed. It's something that, I think about in Acts when Barnabas went to Antioch. What an amazing church. They were first called Christians there. It was one of the first multi-ethnic, multiracial kind of churches. And Barnabas led the way. He established them in their faith and gave them a firm foundation. And then he bounced. He left. It's like, I don't know if many churches that would do that today. Send away the guy. And God had, the Spirit, it says, had work for him to do. And I guess the sentence or the point of this would be, don't overlook the work God has for you here or maybe other places. There's plenty of places where you don't have to feel, you don't have to search for the work. It slaps you in the face because it's a dark place to be, and I'm sure there are places like that around here, but just don't lose sight of the fact that we are, like the old songs we sing, I want to be a worker for the Lord. Each day I'll do a golden deed. These songs that are just like, we know them, but when we sing, we don't realize the commitment we're actually making with those songs to do those things. And these are, again, speaking to myself, don't grow complacent. There remains a rest, and don't let yourself off the hook. That's one of the things I try to remind myself of. And being in a place like Seattle for me, kind of, it helps me in a sense because it's, that's why we're there. And so the fact that we're there for that reason kind of always, it's built-in reminder that, there are places, like here or other places that we might like to live more. And not because of any negative reasons, but just because it could be a little maybe more comfortable for us. Or I'm not saying that to glorify ourselves, but I'm just saying like when it's built in like that, it helps remind me that I want to make it right being here.
Yeah. Well, before we hit record, kind of the analogy and maybe even literally the way that you were describing it was going into places where it doesn't feel like home.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's helpful for us, just a helpful working analogy that, yes, Bowling Green and Lost River in particular, it seems like so many people who walk through the doors, it feels like home. You feel this sense of belonging. It feels like family. But that can lead to this kind of complacency that you're talking about that I've definitely felt myself. And having the mindset of, as awesome as it is to be home, as awesome as it is to come here on Sundays and Wednesdays and to literally go into people's homes and feel that sense of belonging, we also need to be going into the places where it doesn't feel like home. And hearing you talk about it, it also just reminds me of the book that I know you love so much. Like maybe at the time when you were here, it seemed like it was your favorite book, and I was so glad that we got to teach it together because it was awesome learning from you through it. But 1 Peter 2 and verse 9 comes to mind. You even alluded to it in reference to Israel, but it says, "You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness and into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy." Or the way that same word is translated, grace. And I don't know if anyone else listening has noticed this, but the amount of times that you've brought up the grace of God is remarkable to me. And if I could almost just like couch this whole conversation in one expression, it would be by God's grace. And that's so much how you live your life. That's so much how you speak. And the thing that moves us, it seems, out of our comfort zone and into the places that are darkness, that moves us into the spaces where it doesn't feel like home, is by God's grace.
Yeah.
And only through him that we declare his wonderful light.
Yeah. And specifically in that passage, those Christians were living among political dissent in the next section. They were working under people that weren't very kind to them. Slave masters had to be gracious and submissive even to those who are bad slave masters. They were wives that had to understand how to live with an unbelieving husband. So you think about those things. Those things are all true in Kirkland. At the church there, that we have women who are married to unbelieving husbands and who work really hard to make sure that their kids have faith and to be gracious and submissive and a light to their unbelieving husbands. We have, I don't know what you guys think of the politics in the Seattle area. I strive to be apolitical best I can, but we know that a lot of people don't agree with the politics out there. We're not too happy about that, and yet we submit. They submit, and by God's grace, and people who work for unbelieving, it's not the same as slave masters necessarily, but work for employers that are ungodly and shine their lights there. All those specifics with Christ as a central example at the end of 1 Peter 2. Which that book is all about grace. Stand for this. This is the true grace of God. Stand firm in it. All those things are graces. Submitting like that and being in situations like that willingly, and willingly putting yourself under the thumb of people like that, which many of the members, if not all the members at Kirkland, are doing by necessity of living there. it provides actual opportunities for the other kind of main theme of that letter, which is suffering. It is suffering to do that. And in 1 Peter 3, he says, it's better if God should will it so that you suffer for doing what is right rather than for doing what is wrong. If you miss that verse or read it too quickly, you might miss the fact that God would will it, that you would suffer. And we struggle with that.
Yeah.
But that's what those Christians are doing. All these people I listed, they're struggling and suffering through the challenges of really letting God be glorified through their weaknesses and through their pains, through their sicknesses and how they handle it, through whatever, through their work, through the work they're doing for their employers or working in schools, all the things we talk about. And so, I remember working with Andy Cantrell, and I studied 1 Peter with him a lot, and that's what made me fall in love with it more. And so it has always been and is always, I kind of think, one of those books that reminds me that this is not glamorous work, and to the point we started with, it's sent to a bunch of people who are scattered, who are all over the place, who literally are not living at home. And that's the New Testament was written to a bunch of Christians who, like Paul would say, and remind a group of people in Philippi who were very happy to be where they were, probably proud to be Roman citizens. He'd say our citizenship is in heaven, and that's a hard reminder.
Yeah.
For all of us.
Yeah. Well, Ben, I am so grateful that by the grace of God, you got to come here, and I'm so grateful that baby Joanna is here and well, and that y'all's family has been so blessed. And I know I speak for everyone, and just I'm just echoing the sentiment that I know everyone feels, and just how much we love y'all and how much it means to see y'all every time and just be so encouraged by you. And I think everyone just wishes that y'all could just stay longer and longer to just love y'all more. But I hope that this has been a time where y'all just are able to be filled up and are able to maybe go back and just pour our love out on all the people there. And I, in particular, I'm just so grateful for you. And I still tune in every now and then to the Kirkland lessons, and am encouraged by the things that you have to share, that God is speaking through you. But always grateful for just every interaction we have. And it's one of those things that, if I can put it this way, in the words of Mary, or in the words of Luke about Mary, these are the moments that I treasure in my heart, and they mean a lot to me. So,
well, hey, I'm glad. I appreciate it, and I'm really thankful for you inviting me to do this and making time for this. And my desire to do this was to be, I'm not. Yeah, it was just to be an encouragement, and to be hopefully whatever I shared, whatever is, imitate me as I imitate Christ, maybe. So maybe just take 1% of what I said. But no, but the love you all have for Haley, especially for us, Haley just time-wise, since so long, her whole life, is very meaningful to us. And the love you express is meaningful to me. I appreciate it. And truly is. It's a grace. It is. It's just God is good, and His people are good. And we carry you all with us in the work we do. And we're very thankful to be here and to know all of you.